Hare Krishna, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of the Hare Krishna Project podcast. This is episode number 124. A big thank you to everyone who continues to tune in on a regular basis from all over the world. I appreciate you being with us. Do not forget, if you're watching this on YouTube, if you haven't already, to hit the subscribe button so you can be kept updated about future podcasts and video productions from the Hare Krishna Project. Or if you're watching this on Facebook, and if you haven't already, please do like or follow the Hare Krishna Project Facebook page so you can be kept updated about the Hare Krishna Project, all the things that we're doing in that way as well. I really am grateful to everyone who tunes in on a regular basis. As you know, we're still just about clinging on to that top spot as the #1 Hare Krishna podcast in the world, and I kind of take that with some seriousness. It means we have to keep up our standards, and we have to continue to invite exciting guests onto the show, which I know we will this evening, because I love interviewing people, and I love interviewing people from a wide range of backgrounds. As you know, we are passionate about including people here at the Hare Krishna Project. Okay, let's kick off episode 124. I'm absolutely delighted to welcome our guest this week. It's Dion. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
It's great to have you with us. I'm delighted that after all this time, I've convinced you to appear as a guest.
It did take a little bit, didn't it?
It's taken a while,
Yeah.
but I was about to say I can be quite persuasive. Not always, but I do try. Okay, Dion.
Yeah. You didn't stop a no, did you? It was a couple of
I asked you several times because I recognize when someone's got a story to tell. I really kind of come on, share your story, and hopefully your story will come out this evening. So, Dion, let's start with the first question. It's a nice, easy question. It's the question that every guest gets just to warm them up and maybe warm myself up as well. Please tell us a bit about you and where you are from.
Okay, so my name is Dion, and I currently live in the Midlands, a place called Stratford-upon-Avon. You may have heard of it, Shakespeare. It's his birth town. I haven't always been here. I've only been here for the last 8 years, mostly from Kent, which is where I grew up in. My story, however, of how I got here, probably a little bit longer than just this quick introduction. Maybe we can go on to that in a second.
Yeah, okay. 8 years in Stratford-upon-Avon.
Yeah.
I have to admit, I don't think I've ever been to Stratford-upon-Avon, but obviously we all associate it with William Shakespeare because he was born and bred there. And yeah, okay. And Kent, yeah, I've been to Kent many times. I've driven through Kent many times.
Garden of England, they call it.
Yes, the Garden of England.
Yeah.
I go to France quite frequently, so it does mean driving through Kent. Yeah, of course it does. My geography is terrible. Okay. Tell us a bit about how you met the devotees or how you discovered Krishna consciousness.
Okay, so really my thoughts behind this are you kind of have to give a little bit of a background. I can't just go into how I came into Krishna consciousness because there's a little bit of a story behind it. And it kind of like I think there's a film out, and it's been out for a long time, and it matters about what you do before that leads on to other things, that then leads on to other things, and your path changes because of different events that happen in your life. So I think I really have to go back, and this isn't going to be long, but I just kind of bullet points go back to childhood, because some of the things through this matter during that time. I suppose when I was a child, I had quite a few difficult things happen to me as a child, like millions of other children do out there. It's not for like kind of sob story effect. I'm just giving you the picture as to how I got to where I am. You know, usual thing for a lot of people where parents split up, and that happened when I was around about four years old, and dad left. Kind of mum pushed him away in a way, because he was always making promises about turning up and was never fulfilling those promises, and kind of letting me down and things like that. There was some events that happened during my younger years that, again, a lot of people go through, unfortunately. There was some child abuse. It was sexual child abuse. The only reason that I'm saying this is, well, it's twofold, in fact, because I have helped people through their trauma that they've had. And I want to leave it open just in case anybody wants to contact me about reaching out, you know, with an experience that they might have had similar to when they were younger. But secondly, it kind of leads on to my teenage life and also my younger adult life as well. So we'll go back to that in a second. When I was a child from 10, 11, 12 and onwards, and through my teenage life, this doesn't happen much in the UK. However, it does happen abroad a lot. My stepfather, who I was with, he owned a factory, a motorcycle engineering factory, and I was constricted to work with him there at the factory during my school holidays, during after school. You know, I was working on lathes, I was working on drilling machines. This would be through summer holidays, after school, weekends. So I didn't really have much chance as a child to grow up, to play with toys, to do the usual childhood things. And that's, you know, that's something that a lot of kids go through in third world countries, you know, but we don't generally have that here. You know, sometimes I was working up till 9 o'clock at night, you know, if my stepdad had a big order through. So, you know, it's not something that's usual in this country. So my teenage life was a lot of working, but also I had quite a sexual life through my childhood, my teenage years. And now I can understand why I did, because of the understanding that I had at that time of that's how you kind of show affection. It was something that unfortunately I didn't work with. I didn't have the opportunity to work with as a teenager. So I kind of copied the behavior that I learned as a young child. That sexual behavior carried on all through my time as a teenager. Alcohol was another thing. With the very anti-Krishna consciousness, all of this so far, you know, alcohol. I would come home from school, the alcohol cupboard at 12 years old, 13 years old, you know, quite happily go through, you know, some of the apricot brandy that was in the cupboard or whatever that was there. Later on in my teenage years, there was also some drugs involved again. So, you know, we're now a teenager, I'm sexual, I'm drinking alcohol, and I'm smoking weed. So teenage life and childhood life was very anti-Krishna consciousness. You know, I wasn't thinking anywhere along those lines. However, I did feel quite spiritual. Luckily, my mum was somebody who allowed me to kind of think for how I wanted to think. By this time in my later childhood, she she's got multiple sclerosis, so her multiple sclerosis had developed worse, and she heard about, you know, hands-on healing at spiritual churches. I'm sure you've heard about this before. And spiritual churches in the UK, for anyone who doesn't know, are you know, amazing to go to for your first time. It's quite astounding. You see, you know, people doing, you know, hands-on healing and also clairvoyancy. And so my life kind of opened up, and my mind opened up into, there is something else out there. You know, these people were you know, talking to supposedly talking to the dead, and you know, I'm still uncertain to whether that actually happens. And the more I learn about what I've learned about, then maybe, but possibly not our close, dear loved ones. They might have moved on to a different body, rather than just hanging around there in the spiritual world, ready to talk to us. So my thoughts on that are still out, but it opened up. This is what I'm saying. It opened up my mind into believing that there was something else out there, that our souls, if you like, continued. So I guess that was my first introduction to understanding that we are more than this body, and I was definitely open to it. At 18 years old, my mother decided, I actually was 17 years old, my mother decided that she'd had enough of living with my stepdad. He was a worker. He worked people in like almost a slave driver. My mom was very ill, you know, very difficult for her to retain her energy, her strength in her hands, the coordination. However, he would be exactly the same thing. Expect from her to be working until sometimes 10 o'clock at night. So she hatched this plan to, let's go off to Australia. This was when I was 17, and bit by bit she would take a couple of ornaments away from the house, and it might be a photo album throughout the space of a year. You know, it was carefully planned. That would go off to my nan's, and the plan was hatched to go off to Australia. I didn't know a lot of this beforehand. It wasn't until I was close to 18 that I understood what was actually going on. So she was hatched this plan quite secretively. I decided that the army was where I was going to go, so I applied for the army. I got in, and my mum said to me, "Okay, well, this is the plan. You go in the army, or you come to Australia for 6 months." And I was like, "Yeah, all right, I'll come to Australia." So we took away one night, and you know. He was out at some event somewhere, and we packed our bags very quickly, and then went off to a hotel. We had a fancy hotel and a fancy restaurant, and then the next day we flew off to Australia to be with my aunt who lives in Australia. And Australia was another place where this clairvoyancy opened up again, and we went to this group that was, they had their hands on a table. Okay, we all had our hands on this table, and supposedly we were speaking to God to start with. They called him an OG, but it was the God energy. And then we would also speak to spirits, apparently. Again, I don't know if this is true, and I'll explain what happened. That we all put our hands on the table. There's probably around about 7 of us around the table. And we'd ask these questions after protecting ourselves spiritually. And if it was a yes answer, the table would move up and down quite quickly. You know, it was a big round table. It was plastic, though. I want to point that out. It was plastic because there could have been something else going on. And a no was a very slow movement. So it would still topple up and down. Everyone would still have their hands on it. my first time there, I wasn't quite sure what was going on. And so I was thinking to myself, these are faking it somehow. Something's going on. And I was kind of putting my head back and kind of trying to look under the table to see if, you know, if there was something under the table lifting it up. And as I'd done this, the table started to move upwards towards me. And so it's kind of like on two legs now, and it's almost up all the way towards me. There's a person this side still got their hands on it, and the people the other side are, you know, reaching over and they've got their hands on it as well. And I said out aloud, this was after about 30 seconds or a minute of it being there, I said out loud, okay, I believe you, it's sort of fine, I believe you. And then slowly the table tilted back down again. So again, I'm not sure whether or not that was actually happening, whether people were influencing it by putting pressure on the table at this side, the ones the other side were lifting it up. But what it did do is it just opened me up again to believe that there is something else out there. That's what it did do. So I can't say whether it was actually spirits or not, who knows. I opened up my intuition then. My intuition started to become really good. I started to not quite predict things, but almost kind of, if someone was telling me something, I kind of knew whether or not that might or might not be true. And I also was able to tell things about people that they hadn't told me. Now, I understand that we can pick up micro expressions from people. I understand that. And possibly that's where it come from. Again, I don't know, you know, I don't claim to have any special powers or anything like that. However, I'm going to tell you something now about the next phase in my life, which is meeting a guy called Tom Hartman. Tom Hartman, he's an author. He had a radio show, I think, maybe when I started reading his books, but it was on the internet. It wasn't something I really listened to. I think this was in my 20s, and the internet was just really starting to be used a bit more. And I was reading this book by Tom Hartman. He wrote books about ADHD. I was quite interested in ADHD, my attention deficit disorder that I thought that I had because I was kicked out of lots of different schools when I was younger. So that interested me quite a bit. But he wrote a book called Last Hours of Ancient Sunlight, which I found the most interesting. It's kind of about climate change. But one day I was working at a activity parks where we taught people how to do abseiling, archery, climbing, canoeing, you know, swimming, all kinds of different things, caving. It was a great place. It was an adventure place. But at the end of the day, I was about to get into my car and I looked on the floor and there was this huge black feather on the floor before I got into my car. So I bent down and I picked up this feather. And the moment I picked it up, I just heard Tom Hartman's name around my head, not someone else's voice, you know, just your own voice. Like you when you're walking around in the kitchen, you're talking to yourself in your head, like we all do. It was just that voice as Tom Hartman, Tom Hartman. I was thinking, why am I thinking of Tom Hartman? I wasn't even thinking about him before. So I get in my car, I drive home. This is going around in my head quite a lot. And I get home and I think, maybe I should contact him. And it took a few hours. It wasn't straight away. I was trying to talk myself out of it and thinking, no, I can't email him. He probably won't even email me back. And so I did. And I said, this is only not verbatim. This is just a rough idea of what I said. because I can't remember verbatim, and I've lost that email address since. I'm trying to get it back, but I've lost it completely. I said, "Hey, Tom, I love your books, blah, blah, blah. Think you're a fantastic author. I need to tell you something. I picked up this black feather today, and I thought of you, and I needed to tell you about it, and I don't know why." And then I left it. I never thought they'd even read it. I didn't even know if the email was going to get through to him. You know, I found his email somewhere, I think possibly on his website. Then I got an email back from him, and the first part of it was, "Wow, let me tell you about yesterday." He said, "Over the weekend, I burnt my arm from, I think it was a kettle. I think he called it a pot. I went to this Native American Indian healer at a, you know, in like a settlement type thing that they had, and we were in his tent, and he'd done some healing on my arm and put a poultice on, etc. And we walked out the tent, and he bent down and he picked up a feather and he gave it to me, and he said, 'This is your message.' He said, I then came home, and after a while I opened up my emails, and then I've come to this email from you saying about this feather." So that was my first connection with Tom Hartman. You know, he's in America, I'm in the UK, and there was this intuition for contacting him about this feather. So we built up a little bit of an email relationship. You know, we called each other Feather Brothers. I emailed him a few years ago. We still, still messaged him and said, "Hello, Feather Brother." And he then introduced me to some other books, and I ended up going to he invited me to Germany because there was a gentleman that he had visited quite a lot. He was kind of like his mentor in a way. His name was Herr Muller. He'd spent some time in as a prisoner of war. He had the kind of revolution that some people who have written some amazing books had, where he went back to God. You know, sometimes when we're in these difficult times, we go back to God, and he'd read the Bible, and he'd actually afterwards created this this charity. It was called Salem International. They were building homes for homeless children around the world. They had the philosophy that everyone should be a vegetarian. He got this from the Bible. It's actually from the Bible. He stated that thou shalt not kill, and he took it literally, which I think it should be taken literally. Thou shalt not kill. I know we've changed the story over time. I think now it's thou shalt not murder, I think, something like that. So I spent some time in Germany with Tom Hartman and Herr Muller. I actually pretty much hitchhiked my way to Germany. That was quite an experience. It took quite a few days. It was very basic living there. And Herr Muller took quite a liking to me. He anointed me with some oil that he had poured on some rocks where he said Jesus had been crucified. So I felt quite special from that, and I, after a while, come back home to England, and then I felt like I had to do something. So I think it was about when I was 23 years old. There was a project that he wanted to start in Ecuador. There was a gentleman there. Actually, let me take you back to Germany very quickly, because there's someone that really important I need to tell you about. Whilst I was there, I met this amazing man. His name is Jeff Guest. He's Australian. He's half Aboriginal. He's half white as well. He'd had a extremely difficult life. I can come back to that if you want to at another time. But he's what you would know as a shaman nowadays. He's what you would know as a medicine man. He's actually amongst his Aboriginal Aboriginal fellow men, he's known as a spiritual king. I think there's only 12 spiritual kings in Australia at one time. He was anointed or initiated, I don't know what they do, as one of these spiritual kings. He was a fantastic man to meet. In fact, I'll come back to that if you've got any questions.
Can I just ask one question before you continue? You've mentioned the name Tom Hartman quite a bit.
Yeah.
Can you just clarify for us who he was or is? He's written some books about what in particular, what's his mission in life? What does he stand for?
So ADHD, I think, is one of his biggest things. So he's got some schools around ADHD,
Okay.
to kind of teaching children in a different way than our current system teaches children with ADHD. You know, the main philosophy that he teaches is these children have not got a problem like our philosophy or our NHS or our medical system teaches, that these children have attention problems, because they don't. He kind of brackets them into children and people into farmers and hunters. So if you was to take these children that supposedly got attention deficit disorders and you was to put them into a wild situation, living out there in the wild, these behaviors that we say are problems are not problems, they're survival instincts. For example, a child looking out of the window in a classroom, seemingly not paying attention, but notices the caretaker mowing the lawn outside. If you was to put that child into a survival situation, then maybe he's looking at something, but then notices at the corner of his eye a rabbit that he needs to chase, or or a tiger that's coming towards him, or whatever. It's something. This is how Tom Hartman labeled it, not me as a Krishna devotee now. It was something that would be a survival instinct if you got a tiger coming towards you. And the way he also worded it, well, again, this is not coming from Krishna consciousness, but if he was chasing a rabbit and then all of a sudden a deer came past, he would have to make a split decision. And that's where the not thinking about things and making a quick decision, where someone with ADHD, we would label them as not thinking about things, just going off and quickly doing something without thinking about it. Also, we say that a child with ADHD cannot focus. Well, in actual fact, they can focus. He calls it hyper-focusing. And it's the same for if they were put into this situation in the wild where they needed to hunt something, they could hyper focus on something that they needed to hunt for. Whereas a farmer, wouldn't necessarily do things like that. If you put a hunter in a farming situation, he'd be, the child would be digging up the seed to see if it's grown yet, because of impatience and obviously killing the crops, etc. So he bracketed them in those different categories and showed that these hunters just needed to be taught in a different way. Hyper focusing, if you put a child with ADHD, give them a computer game, you can guarantee that they're hyper focused on it. And do they hear their mum and dad calling for dinner? Probably not, because they're hyper focused on it. And that's something that someone in the wild would need for a hunt. They would need to be hyper focused. He also branched out into climate change. So that was quite a big subject for him, and that's where the book The Last Hours of Ancient Sunlight was really focusing on. And he was showing that, you know, the world goes through these different cycles on a regular basis. So that's where Tom Hartman comes from.
Okay, I just wanted to kind of get that clarification from you, because you'd mentioned his name a few times, and I have to admit I've never heard of him. So I apologize for that, but I can understand why, for you and others, he might be inspiring in terms of some of the things that, and I love that feathers story as well. Some things just aren't a coincidence, are they?
No.
A Christian friend of mine calls them, instead of a coincidence, a God incidence. You know, God or Krishna is in control of everything, and even though we might not understand something, God or Krishna is in complete control.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So,
and looking back on it now, I see that. I
yeah.
see that it was a message from Krishna.
So
in a way.
Yes. Everything is. It says in the Bhagavad Gita that not even a blade of grass moves without Krishna's say so. And even when we're going through incredibly difficult things in our lives, we have to try and look at things objectively, philosophically, as difficult as that might be.
Yeah.
So I cut you off a little bit. We got to the point we're talking about you. I think you were about 23. You had come back. You were going to come back to England. Then you mentioned another guy who was a shaman.
That's right. Yeah.
You see, I am listening. You mentioned the guy that was the shaman, and I think you're about to tell us something about him.
Yeah, he was a very interesting man. Again, it was intuition with him that then made me build up a relationship with him and want to progress that relationship with him. He when I met him for the first time, I had this, and it was horrible. I had this feeling of lashing out at him, wanting to hit him, or I felt like that was coming from me in some way. It was hard to explain. I said this to Tom. I said, Tom, when I met Jeff, I had this vision of hitting out at him, and he said, ask him the story or tell him that you had that, and ask him the story about the violence. And then he told me about his unfortunate young age of being taken away from his Aboriginal family, like a lot of them were. And he was made to work on a white farm, and he was abused quite often, and it was always physical abuse as well. So I think that's where that kind of, again, maybe message from Krishna, intuition, whatever it was, came from. But that made me build up that relationship with Jeff. So I went to see him later on, but first of all, Ecuador happened, where Herr Muller wanted to set up something in Ecuador for children out there. So I said, yes, okay, I'll give it a go. So I saved some money and went to Ecuador. I met this gentleman in Ecuador that was also going to be building this homeless place with me. I had no idea what we were going to do or where we were going to do it. I landed in Quito, in the main city, and we took a bus. It must have taken about 4 hours to get to this village, precarious, around mountains, etc. And then we came to this village, who said, well, we're going to go to the place where we're going to build the homeless shelter tomorrow. We can't go there today. So the next day we went there. We had to walk there. You couldn't get there by road. It was through into the jungle. We were going up a mountain, and then again, up and down, and precarious places in parts. We came to this opening in the middle of the jungle, and he said, that's where we're going to build the homeless center. And I kind of inquired about why we're building it here out in the middle of nowhere. And he said the philosophy behind it is to take the children that are homeless in the streets of Quito and bring them out into the jungle to show them how they can grow their own food, to teach them about farming so they've got something, a skill for life, and they can feed their family for life. So we built this. Well, we had to clear the land first, which was done with a machete. I can remember the sores on my hands, you know, down on the ground, chopping away at the grass and making this clearing. And we built these huts from trees, big trees, and these leaves for roofs. And we built these huts. One day I remember that he took me into Quito, and he wanted to show me the places that these children are living in. And I think that was a very hard time indeed. It's something that I'll always remember. I'd just eaten breakfast, and you know, nice and full, and we went to what was a rubbish dump. And before you got to the rubbish dump, and I'd heard someone say about this, that you can kind of see the rubbish dump moving before you even get there. And as you get closer, you can see that this movement is children everywhere. They're searching through the rubbish. They're trying to find recycling and put that into bags to be able to sell it. And of course, in Ecuador, especially at that time, I don't know now, but the sewage system wasn't working, so toilet paper would go into the rubbish as well. And these children are searching all the way through. I can remember this one boy who had walked towards me. We obviously had quite a few children walk towards us, like you do in any scenario like that. And this one boy looking up at me, he maybe was 9 years old. He had a little girl with him. I didn't speak much Spanish at the time, so my friend with me was interpreting. He'd lost his parents. He was looking after his young sister, maybe 3 years old she was. Sorry, I can still see his eyes looking at me. It's his eyes looking at me was something that I'll always remember, because I'm thinking to myself at the time, I've just eaten. You know, I've come from a hostel where this child would love to stay, and he's living in a hut, as the translator said to me, my friend said to me, that was built out of rubbish. But that really concreted me to really want to do more. And then kind of afterwards, it didn't matter about blisters, about the hard work, you know, the things that was difficult about being in the middle of the jungle, building huts from scratch. You know, that's hard work. That was, you're carrying these big chunks of trees on your shoulder and cutting these leaves down and trees down, and it was hard work, but it didn't matter so much after visiting that rubbish dump. So nowadays, you know, I'm glad to say that it's an accomplished project. You know, it's much bigger. It was just us two when we started. There was just 3 huts, I think, when I finished, and when I came back to the UK. Now there's a proper established school there, and it's built a lot better than the huts that we started with. It's a great thing. But I came back to England. I started learning about holistic therapies, massage, and that became my job. My sister, my stepsister, she was a massage therapist. She started to teach me, and she was a teacher as well. So she first of all qualified me. But I've still got it thinking in my head. I want to spend some more time with Jeff in Australia, the Aboriginal, because I was quite getting really interested in shamans and medicine men, and I wanted to explore that world some more. So I eventually arranged to go over to Australia again and spend some time with Jeff Guest. He's still around now. I think he must be about 95 years old now.
Wow. Wow.
And he's still active as well. So he picked me up in Queensland. I forget the name of it was right at the top of Queensland. No, it escapes me now. And then we went for a long drive into the outback and went to his place, which again was a long way away from anywhere, a bit like the jungle. I don't know how I managed to find myself these places, but I did. Again, there's a very basic place to live. Just a generator that went on a couple of hours every now and then just to keep the fridge cold, and the rest of the time not on. It was a farm where he caught wild horses. So horses, his land was huge as well, probably kind of like the size of Kent, that's how big his land was.
Wow.
So some of these horses had never seen man before, some had. He caught these horses in this pen type thing with molasses because they love the smell of molasses. It's like the basics of sugar. I then watched him with a stallion, with just his body language and just no violence at all. Trained this horse, and he was able to get on this horse. I think roughly about an hour it took, which should take normally a lot longer. So I spent some time with Jeff in Australia, and some spiritual things happened. I'll get back to that if you want to.
Can I just quickly ask a question about in terms
Course.
of the timeline? So we went from Ecuador back to the UK. You were still in your 20s at this point.
Yeah, 25,
And
I guess. And
you
then 28 when I went to Australia to Jeff. So I'd spent some time in the UK learning massage and performing massage.
And your mother, when she went, was your mother still in Australia? And
she came back.
she came back.
She was living on her own and building a good established life, and
Okay.
then met a man who was quite a spiritual man as
Okay.
well.
Okay. So she
So
she only stayed in Australia for 6 months or so as well.
yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
the
It
first
was
time.
yeah, the first time. It wasn't a kind of emigrating forever. It was just a temporary thing to get away from your stepfather at the time. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. Okay.
yeah, that's
Um,
right.
I'm loving the story, by the way. I'm listening very carefully, and I'm keen to see what information is going to come out next. So you came.
I'm trying not to make it too long. I'm trying bullet
It's
point it
fine,
where I can.
and I can see that for you, chronologically, you need to go through things in order
Yeah,
to get up to the present day, and that absolutely makes sense.
yeah.
Uh, okay, okay, let's carry on with the story.
So yeah, so basically, at this point, I am opened up quite spiritually now. I'm opened up to the fact that there's other things out there. I met a medicine man in Ecuador, that one in Australia, and I know that there is some things that special things that people can do, and I know that there's a lot more to learn. I started investigating as much as I could with regards to different religions, different shamanistic traditions. I came across Krishna in 2010 in a way. I first heard about Krishna in 2010. Didn't really pay too much attention, but that's when it became evident to me that there's someone called Krishna. And I think I'd seen some Hare Krishnas in the street. I can remember when I was a little bit younger, and matching it to that. And You know, I perhaps at that age didn't really want to get into it too much because I didn't want to go dancing around the street and with my, you know, head shaved, etc. That wasn't something that I was particularly interested in. But I certainly heard about Krishna. In 2014 was when I really delved into it a lot more then, because there's a guy called Santos Bonacci. He does some videos on YouTube, something that might interest you because he's similar to some of the education that you talked about that you've done with regards to religion. And so what he does is he's a synchronist. So he looks at the synchronicity between things and particularly focused on religion. So his videos were talking about the synchronicity between, you know, the ancient Indian scripts and also the later on Bible and Quran, etc. He would show the synchronicity of where it matches up. He would also, his videos are actually really good. He also talks about, shows you in the Bible explains about how the planet, the movements of the planets are also described in the Bible, and that's what a lot of the stories are about. Also, the workings of the body. You know, I'm not going to try and explain it because he has a wealth of information, and it's worthwhile watching his stuff for that. Some of his stuff talks about flat Earth, but I'm not going to go there. But very interesting. But he said something to me that really stuck in me, and that's what got me there. And he said, and he's not really particularly religious man, he just shows you the synchronicity between everything, but he said the most important thing to remember from everything that he's read is when you die, you have to remember Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. I was like, I like that. What is that? And that's the first time I'd heard the mantra. I started reading about it more. So this is 2014. So I suppose that this is when I got into it in a deeper level. I got the Bhagavad Gita. I was kind of going backwards and forwards to it. Didn't read it properly. 2018, I'd met who was someone who's to be my husband. I can remember when I brought him to my house, I had a picture of Krishna on the wall, and he's kind of playing the flute like this, but you can't see the flute. The flute's hidden. And I came home from work one day, and the picture was on the floor and turned around the other way. I was like, "What have you done? You can't do that." He said, "Yeah, but it's that symbol. It's the devil symbol." I don't know. No. No, he's playing the flute. You just can't see it. So it then opened up discussion with my boyfriend at the time into who Krishna was, and we kind of like explored it more together, learned more about it. Although I was definitely much more involved in learning. My teachings were coming a lot from YouTube because I was a very busy man. So whilst I was cooking, whilst I was doing any other things, I was listening to different people. Keshava Swami was one of the ones I was listening to quite a lot. And that's kind of how I was introduced to ISKCON. I heard more about it, and I wanted to visit a temple, and that was in 2022. I think it was October 2022. So I went to Watford, ISKCON, and one of the guides there, Vashana, she showed us around. She talked to us. She was very nice. You know, she knew that we were a couple as well. She didn't discriminate against us. She was seemingly accepting of us, and told us a couple of the rules, and gave us some books. Actually gave some both of us some chanting beads and told us what we need to do with those. I've still got them. They're still the ones I chant with today. So that was my first introduction into ISKCON. At that time, as well, I'd noticed some things about my health. My health wasn't too good. I'd noticed there was, some growths happening within deep under my skin here, and also I was feeling quite a bit of pressure in the back of my head. That's where your ear is, the inside of your ear. I was starting to feel some pressure there, and ended up being a tumor. And I believed that this was actually before 2023. So the things deteriorating with my health were probably around about 2019, 2020. And there was concern for growths of certain growths, and they could turn nasty. But I believed that I could heal myself. All I needed to do was change my diet. The things that I'd learned off of YouTube, and different websites of people changing their diet and curing themselves of all different things, was really stuck in my mind. And I tried different potions and tried different approaches, but it was in 2023, August, that the doctors said, you can't carry on treating this yourself. You need to do something. And of course, I've also got family members and friends that are saying, just stop trying these magic potions everywhere else and stop trying to do this yourself. It's not working. But the doctors said, you really need to do something now. You can't. You're not going to be around much longer if you carry on doing what you're doing. You don't accept treatment from us. So that was when I started some treatment, and I am where I am today.
Can I ask a question very, very
Go
quickly?
for it.
Why were you skeptical or doubtful of mainstream medicine? Why were you trying to deal with it yourself when there is help out there, in getting the help the support that you need?
Do you know what it is? There's so much corruption within the pharmaceutical industry, and they have done a lot of harm. They have done a lot of harm to people with various different things. There's lawsuits all over the place for them. And I truly believe that everything that the pharmaceutical industry was producing was harmful to us in some way. I'd had different videos, watched different videos. I was watching different bloggers that would tell you about this and then show you the evidence. And I still today believe that there's a lot of harmful products out there, but there's also some good as well. There's also some good within the pharmaceutical industry, and there's some things that help. Obviously, it can't be fully corrupt all the way along.
The thing is,
And
this is the material world. This is Kali Yuga. There is corruption everywhere. And
yeah,
unfortunately, we're going to experience that in every aspect, or mostly all aspects of life. But
yeah,
we can use the things in the material world for our overall benefit.
yeah,
So, you know, um, if I have a headache, you know, I used to be a typical bloke. If I had a headache, I'd sit it out. I'll be fine. And after a day or so of having a headache, I'll take a paracetamol or two, you know. And, you know, is someone making a lot of money through selling paracetamols? Yes, definitely. But I don't really care. I'm going to take a paracetamol to heal my body, and I can continue to use my body for Krishna's service.
Yeah.
Our whole
Yeah.
life should be focused on serving the Lord, serving Krishna. And if I can use these forms of medication, which are bona fide, they're you know in the UK, like a paracetamol or whatever, or something for a stomach ache, it's absolutely fine. I had a very sore throat the other week. For some reason, recently, I've noticed that my body reacts more than it used to the change in the weather. So I
Hmm.
used to be more robust, where I'll be fine if it gets cold, I'll be fine if it gets too hot. And now, because we've had these extreme weather changes in the UK from 28 degrees one day to 8 degrees the next, my body reacts. So I had this really bad sore throat for a few days, and I thought, oh, I'll sit it out, I'll be fine. And then one day I just walked past this pharmacy. Oh, I just want to get some like Benylin. I'm just gonna, you know, I shouldn't admit this. I'm just gonna down the Benylin. I didn't down it. I followed the instructions, and after about 3 hours, my sore throat was gone.
Yeah.
Great, I can carry on chanting Hare Krishna without a sore throat. I can carry on doing these podcasts and wind people up. You know, so
Yeah.
so I can use these things in the material world for overall for service of the Lord.
Mm. Yeah.
Always.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad that I came to my senses in the end, because there has been a massive improvement. There has, there's been a reduction of about 80% was on the last count, which is back in January. Just had another recent one as well. But health-wise, I'm feeling so much better. There was some very difficult times during the treatment. There was times that I really did, I thought I believed 100% that this is it. I was, and anyone that's on any kind of chemotherapy or strong drugs will know how horrible it is to the system.
Mm.
There were times that I was off work for long periods of time. I was sleeping quite a lot of the time. When I was awake, then I was feeling horrible. I was being sick. A couple of hours home afterwards, I was starting to be sick. There was times where I was happy to not wake up again. When I was going to sleep at different times, I would be thinking to myself, if I don't wake up, I'm okay with that, because I don't want to feel like this anymore.
Mm.
And I was surprised how easy it is to get to that point when you're so sick, to be able to be accepting of death if it happens. And I've seen that recently. Unfortunately, I've just experienced one of my friends who I met whilst I was having treatment. She's a lovely lady, or she was a lovely lady. Sorry, this was just recent, a couple of days ago. So yeah, I was actually with her when she passed away a couple of days ago. It was quite, I'm honored to have been there during it. And she, during the last part of her life, she had asked me to tell her more about Krishna. She'd never really been religious at any part of her life, and she wanted to kind of build up a relationship with God, whoever God was for her at the time. She didn't know, but she knew that she was going soon. So yeah, we chatted a lot. I taught her what I know, and I don't claim to be an expert, but I took the Bhagavad Gita along, was able to read that to her. Not all of it, but different sections that I felt was important at the time. But it was it was good to be there at the last moments of her life. And again, that's where I noticed how easy it is to slip away. It's like we've done it before.
Mm.
And it's like, it's almost as easy, but from my experience of it, and I'm only saying that because I believed 100% that I was not going to wake up at different times, of how easily we accept it, almost as if like going to sleep. Like we've done it loads of times, and it's kind of like easy. It's not obviously easy for everyone, because there's some people that go through a lot of pain and anguish as they're leaving their body. But for people that are going through an illness where they are in bed and it's expected, and they're slipping away bit by bit, it seems to be quite easy to accept, just like going to sleep. And unfortunately got another friend, a colleague, who went to see him last night. He was also going through treatment at the same time as I was as well, with chemotherapy, and he's we expected him to go last night, but he seems to have made it through today. Again, very weak at the end, and you again kind of accepting it. So yeah, I don't know where I was going with that.
What has having a brain tumor or tumor?
Not quite. It's a tumor that is very close to the salivary glands, and my salivary glands were infected as well, or affected as well.
What has that experience that you've been through, having a tumor, what has that done for, this isn't a word we often use in Krishna consciousness, but what has it done for your faith? You know, has it inspired you to have more faith in the Lord, to chant more? You know, how have these experiences with your health led you to a deeper understanding of Krishna consciousness, if it has at all?
Yeah, it has, very much so. You know, you kind of question, the big thing that you question is sometimes is, why have you done this to me? Why me? That's probably well, for me anyway, I guess for a lot of people, you ask God, why me? And why have I got to go through this? I guess the more that I was taught and the more that I learned, I understood and also felt that it was an opportunity for me to be closer to Krishna. Because you're alone when you are alone, when you know that you're a possibility of you dying. Doesn't matter who's there with you, doesn't matter how many friends you've got around your bed, or family you've got around your bed. That trip that we take, we go alone. We have to go through that alone as a physical being. So it kind of brought me closer to Krishna, because at times you feel like you need him. You need someone there who you feel is going to be there for you and loves you unconditionally. And that's what I was learning. I was learning that Krishna loves us. He loves us all. And he is there for us. So it changed from, why have you done this to me, to, you've given me the opportunity to learn more about you and to learn why this has happened. I understand now that there's probably, you know, it's really intricate when you come to karma and what you're going to learn from your life. So there's a lot of intricacies there. But I understand that it's probably a lot to do with my karma. And yeah, it brings you closer somehow.
You know, and often it's the difficulties and the bad or the negative experiences we have in the material world that cause us to run even faster towards Krishna.
100%. Yeah.
This material world isn't our home. We don't belong here. That's
No.
why we never feel comfortable. That's why we never feel like we fit in, because we don't belong here. We belong somewhere else.
Yeah.
And Krishna can use these experiences that we're having of negativity, pain, suffering in the material world to draw us closer to him. I look at some of the bad stuff that's happened in my life over the X number of years, and and Krishna's always been there. At the time, it's felt very difficult, but actually, I'm still chanting, and my faith, which isn't a word we often use in Krishna conscious communities, is stronger than ever.
Yeah.
I'm even more determined to share Krishna consciousness with others. No one's gonna stand in my way, no matter the things that happen.
Yeah.
Can we change the conversation a little bit?
Absolutely.
Because we could. I think there's so many things you and I could talk about, and I'm already seeing some similarities between us, which I can maybe reveal later on.
Sure.
You've been kind of within the Hare Krishna movement in this life. You've been practicing for about 18 months.
Seriously practicing for 18 months with regards to chanting, etc.
Yeah. And you've been around for 18 months. You've met a lot of people. And you've seen how it works. You've read even more of Prabhupada's books. You've listened to some talks from some gurus, from some teachers. How do you feel like, based on your background and your experiences, how do you feel like you're fitting in? How is it going for you?
In a way, I think I'm quite lucky. I don't know if it's again because of karma. I feel I'm quite lucky. My first experience with ISKCON, and I know that this isn't necessarily a normal kind of thing that happens. The normality is that, if that's our word, normality. Yeah.
I think so. Yes.
Yeah.
I think it depends on the context you're using it in, but I think you're fine at the moment.
Okay, let's say usual, just in case. So the usual thing is where you're not accepted within the Krishna movement, because there's a lot of perhaps prejudice towards homosexuality. I think that comes a lot from the perhaps the 80s and 90s of homosexuality being looked at as a very like kind of dirty, a wrong thing within the world community in a way. Experience quite a bit of prejudice and different experiences throughout my life where it was quite plain that a lot of the general public didn't accept it back then. I think a lot of people that are in the movement, the older ones, the ones that are teaching, they come from kind of that era. But so I can see why a lot of people have had a lot of people with who are homosexual or transsexual or bisexual, whatever it is, the LGBTQBLORQST plus it's more and more letters being added all the time. It's hard to keep up with it, but within that community. I can see why so many people have found it difficult. But for myself, I have been lucky. I have managed to be or feel quite accepted wherever I've been within ISKCON. Especially at my local ISKCON temple, which is Coventry. They've been fantastic. Probably the beginning of 2023 was when I first went there. They were so welcoming. I went there with who was my well, he still is at the moment, was separated because he has schizophrenia. That's another thing. But he was extremely feminine. It was very easy to see that he was gay. We went there at the time, you know, described as my friend. But it was quite obvious. However, they accepted us. They welcomed us in. You know, some of the leaders there, you know, have been fantastic at guiding us along the way about the regulative principles and, you know, what we should and shouldn't be doing with regards to gambling, alcohol, and things. You know, they've been great with guidance and support all along the way. They were very accepting. I guess the main one in Watford, again, I was lucky. I've met the right people there. I've heard from other people that other people have not had that same experience. However, for myself, I have. But I do know that there is, but that's again the same in any institution and the same in any movement, that not everyone is going to be accepting. I think as we're churning over the new generation, the younger ones, they're definitely a lot more accepting, obviously, you know, because they've been, you know, it's now much more accepted in the wider world. But for myself, it has been okay. I can't say that it's been an easy journey for myself, because there is some conflicting information out there about what you can and what you can't do. You have to be married. You can only have sexual relations if you're trying for a baby. Well, that can be very difficult between two men. So it was a very difficult time between me and my husband of working out what we could and couldn't do. And in the end, we abstained completely because we didn't really know what to do. Now we are separated, and that's only because of, unfortunately, his mental health had deteriorated and the schizophrenia has taken over quite bad, that we're not living together. He's living somewhere else with support from a mental health team. But now I'm learning more and more. I understand that, well, perhaps we could have had some kind of, you know, sexual relationship in some way, just not the way things used to be. I don't want to go into too much detail, but I understand for things as the churning is happening and we're getting the younger generation through, it is kind of like being accepted more, and there's kind of like, well, you can do this and you can do that. And that's the way I understand that the movement has moved as well, because right away from Chaitanya, you know, the world has moved along, and I understand that the gurus, they should be teaching with whatever the times are like in the world.
Yes, time, place, and circumstance. You know, and some things don't change like other things change, but some things do and can change.
Yeah.
I mean, you and I are from I think, from a more kind of socially liberal background, where it's okay to, within reason, do what you want, be who you want, whatever that means. And we were, I assume, raised within that environment. And if you look at, particularly in Britain and probably most European countries over the last 10 to 15 or 20 years, society's become much more liberal on things like, allowing same-sex marriage. Also, the Equality Act in Britain, 2010, it makes it illegal to discriminate based on certain protected characteristics. And one of those things is someone's sexuality. So, yeah, and Prabhupada made it very clear that we're all attached to this material world. We're all attached to this material existence, and whether it's a gold chain or a silver chain, in other words, whether it's a homosexual chain or a heterosexual chain or any other chain, we're all attached. We're all attached to. We all have desires. We all have thoughts, feelings, and emotions that bind us to this material existence. And the one thing we'll have in common is that we have this opportunity to take up this philosophy of Krishna consciousness, try and practice this spiritual concept of bhakti yoga, which ultimately can free us from whatever we're attached to. Whether that attachment is sex, whether it's drugs, whether it's alcohol, and all of these things we've been attached to over several lifetimes as well. So it isn't necessarily going to happen just like that. Things do absolutely take time. And I agree with you in terms of, younger devotees, under the age of, I don't know, 50. What's young these days? I don't know how old you are, so I don't know what to say.
47.
47. So younger people are generally more socially liberal, even people that are from maybe kind of Indian backgrounds. They're more socially liberal these days. Does that mean one day that an organization like ISKCON will allow same-sex marriage? I don't know. I think we're a long way from that yet. But the beauty of the Hare Krishna movement in its broadest sense, not just ISKCON, but because there's other groups as well, is that there will be a range of leaders or gurus. So you've got a spectrum here, and you've got kind of conservative over here and liberal here. And some will be quite conservative. Any form of relationship should be between a man and a woman, and that's it. And over here, you've got the more kind of socially liberal leaders that talk about care and compassion and supporting one another, and actually it doesn't really matter if a man finds another man attractive. Let's try and serve Krishna together. And you probably know there are support organizations out there like Galva, and a friend of yours and a friend of mine now, Mitesh, is also doing some kind of campaign work as well. So yeah, it's a really interesting one. And I think the challenge for organizations like ISKCON is how can they remain true to the foundation or the founding principles of Bhakti Yoga, Krishna consciousness, Gaudiya Vaishnavism, whilst at the same time share it according to time, place, and circumstance. And I think and I feel that over the next 10 to 20 years will be quite interesting in how we observe that. Because when I was going to say normal, then there's such a thing as normal, when a regular outsider, when a regular liberal Westerner looks that grew up in somewhere like London or Bristol or another kind of progressive city and sees ISKCON, they say, well, they can't have sex, they can't drink coffee, they can't drink alcohol, they can't smoke, they can't gamble. Where's all the fun? I ain't going to do all of that. I ain't going to do any of it, So how do we present the philosophy, at least in a way that's actually quite attractive? Why do regular guys like you and I join such a movement? I'm conscious that I rabbited on a bit then, but I'm actually quite pleased. I'm very pleased that you have felt included, or you've had opportunities to be included. I've interviewed a lot of or a number of guests from the LGBT community over the last 3 years that haven't felt included. And that's why there is a need for such support groups to be set up to include them, to make them feel valued. Prabhupada wanted ISKCON, wanted the Hare Krishna movement to be a house for the whole world. Well, believe it or not, I mean, this, the whole world isn't heterosexual. And it isn't Indian either. So we
Mm.
have to accept people who are different from everyone else. There's certain, not everybody wants to be included, and that's fine. But ultimately, how can we include the maximum number of people in this spiritual movement? So I'm pleased that you have felt included and valued and
Mm.
appreciated over the last 18 months.
Yeah, and I think that's obviously because of my path. That's my personal path, and that's what was meant to happen for me. As we said somewhere in the beginning of this video, Krishna sanctions everything, and for some reason, I was meant to have an easier time with it, and I was introduced to the right people who were accepting.
Mm.
Even at ISKCON Watford, and I know ISKCON Watford. It's a very busy place. So there's a lot of people that don't know your business down there, and there's a lot of people that just keep themselves to themselves anyway.
Mm.
I think with ISKCON Coventry being a smaller place, and it is a much smaller place, everyone gets to know you. So you do have that case where everyone knows about your sexuality, whereas in Watford, not everyone knew. So the few that I did know, and it was only just one or two people, luckily they were accepting of it. And for me, I'm not flamboyantly gay. I'm not. Most people don't. When I have to have that conversation with them, it's they're, oh, I didn't know you were gay, because I'm not flamboyant about it. So perhaps if I had of grown up, perhaps because I didn't have so many friends who were girls, maybe I didn't have that feminine side of me come out. I don't know. Maybe it's because I only associated with lads that I'm the behavior that I am. So it's not really evident so much. But when I went to Coventry with my partner, yeah, very flamboyant. Sometimes every now and then it would be not quite a crop top, but it would be showing. He'd be showing the belly, and sometimes long dresses. But still, he was accepted. He even did a play. Was part of their play as well. It was fantastic.
That's great, and it's certainly we've been in contact for a while now, and I feel inspired to visit ISKCON Coventry, and it's certainly on my list of places to visit.
Mm.
They've been on my list, my radar for a long time, ISKCON Coventry, for a number of reasons,
Mm.
and I'm yes, hopefully that connection can be made soon.
Good.
Um,
You should. I've seen so many people being welcomed in over the time that I've been there, and everyone's welcomed in, and they treat people. What I like about them is even their leaders there. They don't. You don't feel that they're condescending towards you, or that they feel that they're on a higher level than you. They're yes, they teach you. Yes, they guide you, but you don't feel like they feel that they're above you, that you feel like you're on the same level as them. You're treated equally, and everyone welcomed in. Yeah, it's a great environment, and it's always great kirtan there. It's fantastic.
I'm pleased to hear it. I'm pleased to hear it. Well, I've certainly
Mm.
seen the videos that you've shared on your social media platforms,
Yeah,
which is partly, one of the reasons I want to visit.
yeah.
Okay, Dion, believe it or not, we've been recording this podcast for an hour and a half.
Serious.
Yes,
Wow.
already. It's been a fantastic conversation. My degree was in comparative religion at university, and I did on my course was a shaman, or
Okay.
someone that told me he was a shaman. So I've been aware of shamanism for quite a long time.
Yeah.
There was a lot of interesting people on my course when you do religious studies.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I think your story has been fascinating. I really appreciate you sharing some of the things, those personal things from your childhood, and going to Australia, and the table kind of rocking up and down. I mean, that's a fascinating one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is, I mean, this is your guest 124. I've interviewed at least one clairvoyant. So there's one devotee in London. There's probably a few actually. There's one devotee in London who's a clairvoyant and a Hare Krishna devotee. So I've interviewed him. That was a couple of years ago. I know one Hare Krishna devotee, at least one that does tarot. So we're a diverse community.
Yeah.
And Yeah, and another guy who could kind of see spirits, and I won't say which guest it was. Have I ever said this on a podcast? I'm not going to give too much away. So I was being very professional really throughout the whole podcast, and he was saying stuff about kind of, speaking to the dead and being a Hare Krishna. And during the interview, I wanted to ask him some questions, but I didn't. I waited until we stopped recording, and
Right.
he didn't know much about me at all. And there and he so what he was about to say, there was no way it wasn't on my social media or anything. And I said, oh, what can you tell me about me? And he said, oh, Narada, throughout this whole interview there's been a lady standing behind you. And I'm like kind of like freaking out. And she's had her hand on your shoulder the whole time. And he
Okay.
explained her what she looked like and how she died. And he was describing my nan. And there's
Oh,
nothing about her on my Facebook or anything. She passed away in
wow.
2000. I never talk about her, not in a negative way. It's just, I don't
Mm.
put pictures of her online. It's, and yeah, just the way he described that was so. And I think back in the early days, I used to record my podcasts in my bedroom. So
Oh,
ever
wow.
then I'm kind of a bit freaked out. Who's in my bedroom with me? It's like it's my nan, it's my nan in my room. And yeah, it was just a really interesting podcast. But I haven't asked anyone. There was someone else since who said that they could see uh, dead people, and I didn't ask the question at the end because I was too afraid to see what the answer was of what they could say about me. So yeah, I'm certainly open-minded, and certainly a lot of things like this. I mean, we know there's a spiritual world, absolutely.
Yeah.
And the Bhagavatam and the Vedic literatures do talk about ghosts and spirits, and devotees will have different views though about whether we should communicate with them.
Mm.
But certainly I don't, in the Gaudiya Vaishnava and the Hare Krishna community, I don't think there's a three-line whip like there is in Christianity. In the Christianity, you shouldn't communicate with these people. It says in the book of Leviticus. There isn't the same three-line whip in kind of Krishna consciousness.
No.
It's more about whether you have a preference for doing that. Is there a need? Is there a need to communicate with people who aren't physically with us?
Yeah.
For me, it's about personal choice. I mean, I've never been to a clairvoyant in that sense, or to anyone. I don't feel that I need to. My focus, I try and make my focus is on Krishna, on Prabhupada, on chanting the holy names.
Mm.
Is going to a clairvoyant and communicating with my nan the best use of my time? I don't I don't know. um,
Yeah.
so anyway, I rabbited on a bit, but I think your story's been fascinating, and going to Ecuador and building shelters or homes for homeless children. I mean, most people haven't done that.
Mm.
I certainly haven't done it. And yeah, and thanks for sharing in terms of your sexuality as well. Not a lot of people would do that,
Mm.
partly because it's a private issue and it's actually no one else's business, in my opinion.
Yeah.
What you do with your own life or how you live your life isn't anyone else's business. We live in Britain, which is
Yeah.
a socially liberal country, generally, not all the time, where you're allowed to do what you want. So why is it anyone else's business?
Yeah.
That's my liberal view anyway. And I often get heckled by the conservative quarters of the Hare Krishna movement for being a bit too liberal, but I don't really care. Okay, Dion.
Well, I think it doesn't matter so much because, you know, if you're following the principles, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter about your sexuality at all. I did bring it up because, you know, I think there are a lot of people out there, a huge amount actually, that you know, follow Krishna consciousness, that are gay and bisexual and all sorts. So, you know, I think it's good for other people to know that, yeah, there's other people out there too, and it's okay to follow Krishna consciousness. Because I'm not this body. I'm not my sexuality. I'm the soul at the end of the day, and everything's about building a relationship with Krishna, and that's why I chant every morning, and that's why I offer my food to Krishna, and that's why I read, you know, Srila Prabhupada's books, you know, to build that relationship with Krishna, and that's all that matters at the end of the day.
And that's a fantastic note to end on. That's all that matters at the end
I'll
of the day.
stop talking.
No, it's wonderful. So Dion, I'm going to say goodbye to the viewers at home, and then you and I can have a brief debrief after. So a big thank you to Dion for being our guest on this week's podcast. It's been fantastic to hear his story. I appreciate his honesty, his sincerity, and I hope that a number of you have found his story inspiring. I cannot believe it that he was a guest 124. I feel like we're climbing up a mountain. I don't know where we're climbing to. You know, is there a number that we're reaching to? But 124. Many of you know that I thought I was only planning to do 10 during the pandemic, but we're now on 124, and the pandemic's over. We're still going for it. Do not forget, if you're watching this on YouTube, to hit the subscribe button to the Hare Krishna Project's YouTube channel if you haven't already, so you can be kept updated about future podcasts from us. And also, if you're watching this on Facebook, please do like or follow the Hare Krishna Project Facebook page. And please do send feedback. I love to receive feedback, and I do after every podcast, but it's really important to make sure that your feedback is constructive. You are allowed to disagree with the guest, and you're allowed to disagree with me, but do it in a constructive way, in a nice way, okay? Because I love to know what you think. So until next week, I'll see you all soon. Thank you. Hare Krishna.